Hello, I am AARP Vice President Bill Walsh, and I want to welcome you to this important discussion about the coronavirus. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. In the face of the global coronavirus pandemic, AARP is providing information and resources to help older adults and those caring for them. Today, we'll talk with experts about how to best manage your career and personal finances during this uncertain economic time. We'll also learn how federal government actions have affected older adults' wallets and ways local governments are supporting small businesses. If you've participated in one of our teletown halls, you know this is similar to a radio talk show, and you have the opportunity to ask questions live. For those of you joining us on the phone, if you'd like to ask a question about managing your career, business, and income, press *3 on your telephone keypad to be connected to an AARP staff member who will note your name and question and place you in a queue to ask that question live. So to ask your question, please press *3. We'd also like to welcome our webinar participants to this special integrated event. Those joining us online can ask questions via the Q&A tab in the webinar platform or by leaving a comment on Facebook. Hello, if you're just joining, I'm Bill Walsh with AARP, and I want to welcome you to this important discussion about the impact of the global coronavirus pandemic on careers, business, and finance. We're talking with leading experts and taking your questions live. To ask your question, please press *3. Joining us today is Andrea Grant, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Lee, Hecht, and Harrison. Gene Chatzky, best-selling author and CEO of HerMoney.com. And Steve Benjamin, Mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. We'll also be joined by my AARP colleague, Gene Setzman, who will help facilitate your calls today. AARP is convening this teletown hall to help you access information about the coronavirus. While we see an important role for AARP in providing information and advocacy related to the virus, you should be aware that the best source of health and medical information is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It can be reached at cdc.gov/coronavirus. This event is being recorded, and you can access the recording at aarp.org/coronavirus 24 hours after we wrap up. Now I'd like to welcome our special guest. Andrea Grant, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Lee, Hecht, Harrison, is a leading consultant who helps people thrive in an ever-changing world, build their careers, and find their next opportunity. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. Joining us again is Gene Chatzky, best-selling author and CEO of HerMoney.com. She is an award-winning personal finance journalist with more than 2 decades of experience helping people manage their money, including serving as AARP's financial ambassador. Welcome back, Gene.
Thanks so much, Bill. Nice to be here.
All right. And also joining us is Steve Benjamin. He's the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina. He has been in office since 2010, and he has made it his mission for Columbia to be the most talented, educated, and entrepreneurial city in America. Mayor Benjamin is also the immediate past president of the United States Conference of Mayors, after serving as the organization's president from 2018 to 2019. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Bill, thank you so much. Glad to be with you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Let's go ahead and get started with our discussion. Just a reminder, to ask your question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. Andrea, let's go ahead and start with you. With unemployment numbers rising rapidly as a result of the pandemic, what's the national outlook on jobs? Is there a current demand for certain kinds of jobs and skills? And what advice do you have for job seekers during these uncertain times?
Sure. Great question, Bill. So the national outlook on jobs is actually not as bad as people may think. For example, LHH produces a weekly job bulletin for the job seekers that we support. And just last night, we realized through the help of Talent Neuron that over 1.4 million jobs were published this week. So that should keep people hopeful and optimistic. Another example is that LHH actually hosted a virtual career fair today for our job search candidates. We had over 50 companies participate, and 5 staffing companies from the Adecco brands also participate. So that should give people a glimpse of hope, too. Some of the companies that participated covered a variety of industries, sectors, and professional levels. More specifically, according to jobshunt.org, some of the top companies hiring this week are AutoZone, PetSmart, Walmart, Dollar General, CVS Health, Amazon, and Home Depot. It is important to note, Bill, that even during the global pandemic, the companies I just named are hiring from almost 20,000 to almost 60,000 workers nationally right now. So pretty encouraging.
Right, of course, I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, of course, that's against the backdrop of the millions of unemployment claims that we've seen filed recently.
That's correct. That is correct. You asked me to touch on certain job skills, right, during the uncertain time. So I'd like to go over that if that would be helpful as far as some of the jobs more granularly that people are looking to fill, even despite the number of unemployment claims that have been filed.
Yeah, please do. So what kind of jobs and skills are most in demand right now?
Yeah, sure. So again, they run the gamut, right? From skills are the top skills right now being seeked out in job ads are analysis, operations, innovation, compliance, implementing strategy, and healthcare. The jobs themselves that people are looking to fill, and quickly, range from transportation and logistics to finance and accounting, IT, various types of sales and management, and even back office support, in addition to, of course, healthcare.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Let me just follow up and maybe get some practical advice for people, particularly if somebody is thinking about changing careers, whether by choice or necessity. Do you have any tips on how to identify those transferable and marketable skills? I mean, particularly for older adults who may be worried about age discrimination.
Absolutely. Great question. And this comes up, of course, even without a global pandemic, right? So 2 things that we want to touch on here. First is helping people understand what transferable skills are. They are qualities that transfer from one job to another. Some examples are communication, organization, and problem solving. Another piece that we want to cover here is their personal and professional brand. So again, right, your brand is a brief statement that summarizes your unique strengths and how you differ from everybody else going after that same job. It also assists you in defining who you are, what makes you great, and most importantly, why you should be hired. So your brand really communicates your reputation and your value to an employer. Now, going into the changing careers, very important. So we want to focus on, again, the transferable skills and changing careers. Forbes actually published an article back in 2018, and it listed 7 transferable skills that are needed to change careers, and those are still applicable today. They are technical, communication, critical thinking, multitasking, teamwork, creativity, and leadership. And it's important, Bill, for the listeners to know that leadership doesn't necessarily mean managing people, but being able to exhibit leadership qualities, right, in some way about something or some project or responsibility.
Got it. Andrea, just a moment ago, you were talking about some companies that had begun hiring. Can you mention those names again for our listeners?
Absolutely, I can. Sure. AutoZone, Walmart, CVS Health, Dollar General, Amazon, Home Depot, and PetSmart are just some that are hiring in the tens of thousands of positions right now.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's turn to the financial side of the situation for a moment. Gene Chatzky, if people are close to retirement and they find themselves currently furloughed or unemployed, what should they consider before tapping into their 401ks or applying for Social Security?
Thanks so much, Bill. And I think the general overarching advice is that we want to try to avoid applying a long-term solution to what may be a short-term problem. So if you're somebody, for example, who has been putting money away for retirement, into your 401k on a very consistent basis. You're on track to meet your goals, and all of a sudden you find yourself short of income. Tapping into that 401k, paying taxes on that money, even though the CARES Act has given us some relief as far as penalties are concerned and has increased the amount that you can borrow, is not the first move that you want to make. Similarly, going ahead and starting your Social Security benefits is not a move that you want to make rashly or quickly if you don't have to. We know that for every year from age 62 to age 70 that a person can put off taking Social Security, benefits generally grow by about 8% a year. That's a huge return on your money. It's a return that is very, very difficult to beat in any other way. And so the question to ask yourself is, what are my other options? What else can I do instead of pulling money out of my 401k? What else can I do instead of starting the clock on Social Security? So we want to look at what's available in terms of government programs, your stimulus checks. Perhaps you're expecting a tax refund, and that could tide you over for a little while. If you are a self-employed individual or somebody who runs your own business, you are in the pool of people who are eligible to apply for unemployment this time around, and your benefits will last you for a longer period of time, again, because of provisions in the CARES Act. And then listening to Andrea, I couldn't help but think there are jobs out there, and perhaps finding one of those by taking your transferable skills and applying them at a place where they're actually hiring might be what's necessary until you can get yourself back on track, rather than pulling money out of the 401k, rather than applying for Social Security earlier than you'd wanted to.
Yeah, I like how you set that up by saying people should be wary about applying a long-term solution to what may end up being a short-term problem. That seems like a healthy way to think about this.
Yeah, I think, these are times of very, very hard choices. I was working on my column for AARP magazine this month. It's not out yet, but I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek. And I ended up writing about how do we make the least bad choices. At a time when we are faced with difficult choices, we want to make the best bad choices that we possibly can. And so by that measure, if you can stop contributing to your 401k and that gives you the wiggle room you need, that's better than borrowing, and borrowing is better than out and out withdrawing. Okay.
Well, let me bring Mayor Benjamin into the conversation to talk about another group facing some very difficult choices. Much of the discussion with small businesses is centered around the Small Business Administration and the federal stimulus measures. I wondered what role the local governments and community organizations have in supporting businesses during the pandemic. What's being done in your city, and what are other local governments doing to support those small businesses?
Sure, Bill. Thank you, and hopefully you guys can hear me. It's I feel like I'm singing the song my children would hear on their shows when they were kids. One of these people don't belong here, and to be sitting here getting free advice from Gene Chatzky and hearing Andrea Grant share her years of experience is an incredibly amazing opportunity to be on this call with AARP right now. Something that Andrea said about the skills of communications and organization and problem solving, it really goes to the heart of some of the conversations I've been able to participate in with AARP over the years as we work to build age-friendly communities and pilot some ideas here, working with this great organization here in Columbia. The reality is that those skill sets right there, as we talk about the way the world's changing and technology has been changing the world with automation and AI, artificial intelligence and advanced machine learning, is that those are skill sets that you develop through experience. And smart cities have really been focusing for the last several years, not on millennials, but on perennials. Those of us over 50 and 60 who have the gift of experience that keeps on giving. So I just wanted to kind of second the motion that the folks on this call have a very special skill set that is very much in demand in today's economy, and want to encourage people to continue being the entrepreneurial force that we are. Here in Columbia, we decided that we would, in tandem and maybe actually in advance of some of the work that was happening on Capitol Hill around the CARES Act, looking to stand up small businesses, that we would kind of lead from the front. And we established what's called a resilient Columbia plan, established a small business stabilization fund that we launched last month, very quickly deployed about $1 million in small business forgivable loans. Very quickly got them out to about 220 small businesses, and then came back next month and put another $400,000 into small businesses. We wound up with about 350 businesses that were supporting small forgivable loans between $4,000 and $10,000 that would help with rent payments and lease payments, payroll expenses, just to try and soften the blow of that every business was feeling from COVID-19. A number of these businesses also participated in PPP loans that were coming from the federal government. We have some wonderful testimonies from our businesses as to how this helped them get over the hump. There are still a significant number of efforts that we're also obviously trying to direct some federal funding and state funding into more businesses and finding new ways as well to direct some of our largesse, the money that we have, that we hold in public trust in various bank accounts, and trying to find creative ways to direct some of our deposits from Wall Street banks into Main Street banks, into community banks and CDFIs that can then help use those resources to lever up small businesses during these very difficult times.
And how have they been faring there in your city?
They've been doing very well. The programs have been very popular. I mean, and we're encouraged to hear testimonies from our small businesses as to how they receive these funds. But I'll tell you, we're in a very challenging position that everyone on this call is facing right now. We know that if we follow thoughtful data, that we have to see, a real deceleration of cases, as the CDC would tell you, in order to really start easing social distancing guidelines. That's what you should do. But at the very same time, we realize that social distancing can be economically ruinous for so many businesses. So how do you really just take a very data-driven, smart, compassionate approach to try to find creative ways to support our businesses, and while at the very same time making sure that we're taking care of the employees and the small business people and the patrons who we want to help thrive and stay healthy in this time. It's a delicate balancing act, but something we've decided that we're going to be innovative and we're going to be iterative, and we'll get some things right, we'll get some things wrong, but we're never going to stop trying. You need leaders for times like these.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, so much for that. Andrea, let me swing back to you. I was curious about what resources and support are out there to help people build new skills and better position themselves for the job market now and during what we hope is going to be an economic recovery.
Absolutely, Bill. So one of LHH's sister companies is called General Assembly, and everybody's probably either read about, heard about, or will hear soon about upskilling or reskilling. This is going to be critical for not just the jobs of today, but the jobs of tomorrow. So General Assembly offers upskilling and reskilling, right, in areas of like web development, data science, and others. They actually, on Fridays, offer free classes So there are a lot of resources out there that can help people. The local community colleges also are great ways to build skills, right, or refine skills that maybe people haven't used in quite some time. And then there are other organizations out there, right? There are these online programs through institutions like Harvard or others that are actually, even NASA, right, are letting you take a peek into their libraries or offering deeply discounted access to their materials and content and even certifications.
Well, that's fantastic. And while we're on the topic of work and jobs resources, let me talk about some that AARP offers. You know, we encourage our listeners to go to aarp.org/work. You'll find there free tools and resources, including the AARP Resume Advisor Service and also the AARP Job Board, which can help you look for jobs with employers who value your experience. I had mentioned age discrimination in the past, and we know that's a real issue that people contend with, and our job board can help connect job seekers with companies that are open to hiring people with the experience that we've been talking about here. As a reminder to our listeners, to ask your question live, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. As we've been saying, this is a difficult time for everyone, and I'd like to take a brief moment to tell you about a few things that AARP has been doing to help protect older Americans and get them what they need during this pandemic. First, we fought to ensure that Americans whose primary source of income is Social Security, SSI, and veterans benefits will receive payments of up to $1,200 under the economic stimulus package. And this is important, they will not have to file any additional paperwork to receive that payment. You can visit aarp.org/coronavirus to use AARP's stimulus payment calculator and estimate the value of the payment that you'll get. We've also pushed to expand unemployment insurance benefits, as well as paid family and sick leave, virtual visitation in nursing homes, and we've stood up for the most vulnerable seniors by helping to secure increased funding for critical programs like Meals on Wheels. Well, we've been hard at work here in Washington, D.C. AARP representatives across the country are fighting for you during this public health crisis on a range of issues, and I just want to share a few examples. In North Carolina, New York, and New Jersey, AARP is fighting to expand paid and emergency leave for workers. And AARP offices across the country are fighting for increased transparency about coronavirus cases in elder care facilities, securing sufficient protective equipment for nursing home staff and residents, bringing communications technologies into those care facilities, and making sure people aren't inappropriately discharged or transferred. All of these important topics are critical for older Americans, and AARP's advocacy would not be possible without the phone calls, emails, and actions from AARP members, volunteers, and older adults across the country. So thank you for that. It's now time to address some of your questions about managing your career, business, and income with Andrea Grant, Gene Chatzky, and Mayor Steve Benjamin. Please press *3 at any time on your telephone keypad to be connected with an AARP staff member to share your question. I'd now like to bring in my AARP colleague, Gene Setzvan, to help facilitate your calls. Welcome, Gene.
Thanks, Bill. I'm delighted to be here.
All right. Well, who do we have on the line? Who's our first caller?
Our first caller is coming in from Texas. It's Donzella from Texas.
All right. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you, guys, for all that you're doing to help us get through this crisis. We really appreciate these calls. My concern is if you don't feel safe as a senior going back to work at this time, can you actually be fired? If your employer is not providing individual protective devices and you have diabetes or some underlying condition, can you actually be fired if you do not go back to work at this time? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a question a lot of people are going to be confronting. Andrea Grant, do you want to address that one?
Sure, and thank you for calling in. I am an HR person by profession and training, and while I can't say yes or no, you'll be fired, what I would highly encourage you to think about is speaking with your HR representative and your direct supervisor. You may or may not have already shared personal information about a medical or other condition and asked for and were receiving reasonable accommodations before COVID-19 took place. But I would encourage you to have that conversation to whatever comfort level you have and to request what you feel is appropriate within reason to go back to work.
Just to follow up on that, Andrea, I mean, assuming she didn't have a condition that she was dealing with before and she's simply concerned about working conditions being around, crowds of people, et cetera, what kind of recourse does she have? What kind of protections will she have?
Sure. Well, each state is different. And this is an unprecedented pandemic, right, that no HR person or no company, frankly, has ever dealt with before. So what I would encourage, again, is, to do research. There are lots of information out there, Bill. SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, has information. Go to your state or even local website to see what they've published, right, in regard to support, advocacy, things of that nature, to see what type of information you can get. But I think assuming the positive, just having a conversation and being transparent and telling them you're not comfortable with returning to work and giving a valid reason, right, a reasonable reason. Employers are being extremely diligent and flexible and agile with people's requests and concern because, quite frankly, a lot of them share them.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Gene Setzman, who do we have next on the line?
We have David from Pennsylvania.
Hey, David, go ahead with your question.
I have two questions. The first thing is my company that I had, I'm unable to sell because it's in the automotive industry. But what I was doing since the beginning of the year is I was doing gig economy, delivering food. And I had stopped doing that on March 12th when conditions got bad here and it was shelter in place. I want to go back to that, but the question is, am I safe for doing that? I have no underlying conditions. I do have high blood pressure, but I do take medication for that, so it's under control. And the second thing is, I see that I'm able to apply as a gig worker for unemployment insurance. How do I do that? And the second question is, I see on the news that they're saying without restrictions that the infection rate will go anywhere from 50 to 70%. So the question is, what good does it do to stay sheltered in place? Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for those questions. I'm not sure we don't have any healthcare experts on the line today, so I'm not sure we can address those particular questions. But Gene Chatzky, he did talk about unemployment benefits and was wondering whether they applied to people in the gig economy. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm sorry I can't answer your healthcare questions, but you're right. People who are self-employed, gig workers, freelancers, 1099, are eligible for unemployment at this time under the CARES Act. The way you apply is by going to your state's unemployment website and filing a claim. And just one note of caution, I know that you say you're from Pennsylvania. I'm not sure how closely Pennsylvania is to have to be catching up with traditional unemployment for the gig workers. But what we're hearing from states across the board is that they were taken aback when the CARES Act passed and all of these new types and categories of employees were now eligible for benefits. They have been trying to catch up. And so what many people are finding is that they're applying, they're being told they are not eligible, and they have to apply again. You should know you are eligible, but you may have to apply more than once in order for the system to catch up with you.
Okay, Gene Chatzky, thank you very much for that. My colleague Gene Setzfen, who do we have next on the line?
We have Helena from South Carolina.
All right, Helena, go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is actually for Mayor Benjamin. Mayor Benjamin, I'm a senior citizen, retired, but self-employed, actually on my third career. After officially finishing work, I started writing children's books. But my question has more to do with the senior citizen population, particularly in Richland County, South Carolina. I live in Northeast Columbia and travel into Columbia several times a month, one of which had been to the Lurie Center, the Senior Center. I'm a member of AARP chapter in Columbia, and there's talk of opening the Lurie Center again. My question is, given the fact that our numbers, not only in the county, but in the state, have not stayed down, they continue to climb, is the Lurie Center going to be opened? Because I do know the social isolation is really bothering many, many people, particularly seniors. So if it opens, what sort of accommodation or restrictions are going to be applied for events happening there? When we have our AARP chapter meeting, we have 100 to 200 people showing up. What sort of, as I said, accommodation or restrictions are going to be put on things like meetings like that, gatherings, if in fact the Lurie Senior Center opens?
All right, Helena, thank you for that question. And Mayor, before you answer, I wonder if you can address the specific question, but maybe broaden it as well. When you talk to your mayoral colleagues around the country, what kind of considerations are on your mind as you move to reopen your local economies?
Sure. On the and I'll very quickly try to touch on the macro and then on the micro here in Columbia. Ma'am, I also live in Northeast Columbia, so we probably pass each other on the way downtown on a regular day. The reality, and also to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, the reality is that regardless of what policymakers might do wrong or right on the national level, on the state level, or local level, our individual responsibility to the collective is that we should still always engage in social distancing as best we can. We should use, if we're required to go out to earn a living or for some other reason, use personal protective equipment. If it's a medical grade mask, non-medical grade mask, or something we made ourselves, I think it's anything and everything that we can do to protect our health and the health of those around us that we care about or who may be perfect strangers, we should do. As it relates to the Lurie Center and other seniors centers around the country, I am gravely concerned. I'm happy that as you may have seen here in South Carolina, the state is now providing more resources to prioritize services and testing available to senior care facilities and other congregate care facilities. We're helping direct some of that focus here. We have actually, as you may have learned, made some funding available to the Lurie Center to help with some of the senior outreach issues, the isolation issues that Bill just mentioned as well. But no, I will make sure that we have some very clear conversations, not just with the Lurie Center, but any place where we expect that a number of seniors might be gathered. We have obviously shut down our city parks for right now. We have some very robust programs for senior workouts, and we have a plan now set up in which we're reaching out to 572 seniors as wellness checks right now, but we will never, until we have our arms around a true deceleration trend, allow seniors to converge back on our city parks. The same ought to apply for the Lurie Center and everywhere else similarly situated. We got to make sure we take care of each other. I'll make sure I reach out to Sandra and understand exactly what the plans are moving forward for the Lurie Center. I love the Lurie Center. I love all our seniors who built this wonderful community that we all benefit from right now. We've got to make sure that in these uncertain times we have a strong and protecting environment.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. Let's go back to our callers. Who do we have next?
We have Frank from New Jersey.
All right, Frank, what's your question?
Yes, I'm a 60-year-old person who was recently unemployed due to COVID. My position was eliminated. My goal is to gain full-time employment. I had a goal of working maybe another 10 years, both for financial and personal fulfillment reasons. And with all the resources that are out there, some which you guys have touched on already, I'm just trying to understand how does one best organize this re-employment journey, and what's the best approach for this? And I just don't know, where do you start, and is there a better way to proceed than another versus just, kind of haphazardly trying to use the resources that are out there?
Right. Frank, before I let you go, can you just tell us, what industry you were in and want to be in?
I was involved with architectural building products, construction, woodworking, things of this sort.
Got it.
And I was on the sales and marketing side.
All right, got it. Thank you so much. Well, Andrea Grant, can you address Frank's question?
Sure, absolutely. So a couple of things to get anyone started, right? Whether they're laid off, furloughed, RIFed, or just reentering the job market, you want to be sure that you have a resume that speaks to the market you're trying to address. It should be no longer than 2 pages in duration. There are a variety of resources available to help you with that, including local unemployment offices. They can help you with that at no cost. You also want to, because of the industry and type of position you're seeking, going to want to be sure that you have a LinkedIn profile. You'll want to make sure that you have a professional. Again, you can get help through the unemployment office or someone you know and trust to get your LinkedIn profile updated with your most recent experience. You're going to want to be sure, again, to highlight your transferable skills, but more importantly, your accomplishments. No one cares, quite frankly, and excuse me for being candid, about your responsibilities. So they're going to want to see things on your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and when you're speaking with them in any type of setting, conversation, interview, etc., they're going to want to hear qualitative and quantitative accomplishments. Did you save money on projects? Did you avoid, environmental hazard from taking place? Things of that nature you're going to be wanting to show, again, on the resume and the LinkedIn profile. But networking is going to be your most important resource. Also, if you can volunteer, organizations like AARP or other organizations are looking for volunteers all the time. Many of these organizations actually hire from their volunteer pool. But going back to the networking is a two-way street, and it's reciprocal. So networking is not going to someone and asking them for a job. Networking can be something like, hey, I was on this AARP teletown hall, and they said one of the top jobs being recruited for right now is in sales. Can you let me know what the environment looks like at your organization? Don't limit this to just people in a business setting. Ask people at church. Online, meetup groups are available. Google that. Go to Meetup, type in your industry or sales, and find an online group in your area to start networking with. So I hope that helps answer the question. So again, get your resume up to market speed, get your LinkedIn profile up to market requirements, network like crazy, but effectively and appropriately. Volunteer if you can, and also log your activity. You'll easily forget what you're doing if you don't. Get a journal or, use your cell phone or a day planner or something to keep track of what you're doing so that you know what's going on. You can follow up appropriately. So I hope that helps, Bill.
Okay, Andrea, thank you so much. And I'll just mention since you did urge Frank to get his resume into shape, that at aarp.org/work, we have a free resume advisor, so you can check that out. You can also see all the resources we have for reentering the job market, getting your LinkedIn profile in shape. And we also have a free job board there, so it's worth checking out. We get some pretty good reviews on it. So, all right, who's next in the question queue?
We have a question coming in from the webinar platform from Robert, and he's asking, what if I have debt debt at levels higher than 8%. Is it reasonable for me to take Social Security and paying down my debt?
Well, that sounds like a question for you, Jean Chatzky. Do you have any advice to offer?
It does, and I would suggest before you try Social Security, you try to recast that debt. If there is any silver lining to the situation that we're in right now, it's that interest rates are really, really low. I get where you're going with the math, right? You know, and clearly you've thought this through, but you know that when you pay off a debt, the return on your money is equal to the interest rate. So when I said that the annual bump that you get in Social Security by waiting is 8%, you logically thought about that and you said, okay, well, maybe I can beat that by paying off high interest rate debt. Before you do that, recognizing that debt is a shorter term problem and Social Security a longer term solution, I want you to take a look at your credit score and I want you to see if it's in decent enough shape to perhaps transfer the balance, if it's credit card debt that we're talking about, to a 0% credit card, which would give you leeway to really pay down that debt much faster. If we're talking about a mortgage, which we're probably not if it's over 8%, you can look at bringing down what you're paying because mortgage rates are substantially cheaper now than they were even a couple of months ago. We hit a new low just last week. Even car loan debts can be refinanced, as can student loan debts. So again, my preference is that you try to kick the can down the road on this irreversible Social Security decision and look for another way to pay off these higher interest rate debts. And one last thing, if this is a problem that you've been struggling with for a while in terms of credit card debt, getting in touch with a not-for-profit credit counselor that you can reach by getting in touch with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, NFCC, may be a smart move.
All right, some great advice there. Thank you, Jean Chatzky. Who's next in the queue to ask a question?
We have Maxine from Washington.
Maxine, go ahead with your question. Hey.
Hello. Thanks for taking my call. My husband and I are in the high-risk age group, and so we're a little bit confused about the stay-at-home orders because we were both working before the pandemic and have been on furlough. But now our company is asking us to come back to work even before the stay-at-home order has been removed for someone in our age group. Is that legal for them to do? And my other question is, if we don't want to return to work, can we continue on unemployment under the CARES Act because of our age without getting taken off of unemployment?
Okay, two tricky questions there. I wonder, Andrea Grant, if you have some thoughts on the first one. It's similar to the question that was asked earlier of someone nervous about coming back to work. Is it legal for the companies to be demanding that people come back?
So you're right. It is a tricky question and a trickier answer. So again, right, what I would encourage, I can't answer, right, whether it's legal or not. What I can say and how I will answer is, again, I would highly recommend contacting your HR person and manager first through phone and having a conversation, a factual conversation, taking the emotion out of it and just informing them or reminding them of the stay-at-home order that's in effect. And I would follow up in writing with the HR manager and the boss or manager included on the same email and copy yourself so that you have that for your records, reminding them of the stay-at-home order and then asking them what type of requirements or protective gear or other type of support they're going to provide to ensure a safe work environment. And then I would go from there. That's the best answer I can give, Bill, without, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice.
Well, I think these questions are going to be talked about a lot all over the country. So I think, Maxine, there are going to be people weighing in on both sides of that debate in your community and others around the country. I wanted to go to the mayor on this and maybe take it from a different perspective. What are you advising companies to do? I mean, I'm sure they're anxious to get up and running again and bringing their employees back. Are you, when you meet with chambers of commerce, et cetera, what kind of advice are you giving them?
Sure. We actually have our Economic Recovery Task Force meeting tomorrow morning, and after our call tonight, I'll be getting ready for that. You know, we've been, as I mentioned earlier, very judicious in relying heavily on data, consistent with several of the concerns I've heard raised from our AARP family here tonight. And we've encouraged our business community, and we've spent a great deal of time over the last several years. I was a chair elected to the Chamber of Commerce before I became mayor. We've finished 8 of the last 10 years with a budget surplus. We've never raised taxes. We've worked with great organizations like the AARP in building not only age-friendly communities, but cities from the inside out. So we have a great deal. I say all that to say we have a great deal of currency with the business community. So they're relying on our advice and counsel as to how we move forward in a thoughtful and very intentional and deliberate manner. The data in so many of our communities is not there yet to indicate that we should be flinging open the doors. We should be relying heavily on data, making investing in testing, investing in contact tracing, investing in isolation, for those who may be affected, and making sure our healthcare capacity is there before we start making these dramatic moves. And what we've been advising our business community to do is to follow the data and to keep our eyes on the long-term health of the community, recognizing that if we have a healthy community, we'll have a healthy business community as a result of that. And there's been a great deal of discussion as well just around liability issues opening too fast and what that means not just for your business and your employees, but also to your patrons. The reality is that I would advise business leaders, as I do here locally, is to keep our eyes on the long ball. And the reality is that if we drop the ball now, if we mess up now, it can really affect the health and prosperity of your business over the long haul. And that's been our advice and counsel. That's what we continue to do, and we continue to obviously to be, again, very creative in ways to sustain business and make sure they have the tools that they need to transition into what will be a very different world once some of the things that we're doing right now because of the pandemic will become a significant part of our culture. Some of the things that we talked about that seemed unlikely just several months ago will very much become the way we live going forward, whether it's universal health care or mail-in voting or whatever happens to be. The world's going to change very, very rapidly. And so I think encouraging the business community, empowering our citizens to make sure that we're adapting to those changes, I think we're going to wind up being a healthier community on the way out of this.
Well, let's hope so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to shift back to the topic of income and finances. Gene Chatzky, what has been done by the federal government so far to support workers and small businesses during this pandemic? How can people ensure they're getting the benefits they're eligible for right now?
Sure. So basically, there have been two major initiatives. The first for individuals would be the stimulus payments that are available and have been largely given out to people who earn up to $75,000 a year. Those folks qualify for a stimulus payment of $1,200 from $75,000 a year to $99,000 a year in adjusted gross income. You qualify for a somewhat smaller stimulus payment, but after $99,000 a year, they tap out completely. If you're married filing jointly, the level of those payments is double. If you're a head of household, you can qualify for the full $1,200 at a higher income of up to $112,500, and there's an extra $500 for each child dependent under the age of 17. Now, many of these have already gone out, millions and millions, well over 100 million of these have already gone out, but we do know that some people have not received theirs yet. And if you haven't received yours, chances are it's for one of two reasons. Either the IRS was not sure exactly how to find you because it didn't have direct deposit information for your bank account, and for that reason has sent you a paper check. Paper checks started to go out the beginning of May. They will continue to go out for the next couple of months. Or if you are an SSI recipient or a recipient of VA benefits, it took a little longer for the government to catch up and direct deposit your payment. If you are looking to track your stimulus payment, you can now go to irs.gov. There is a Get My Payment tool. If you click on it, you should be able to figure out the status of your payment. Again, if you're an SSI or VA recipient, they may still not have your information in that tool, but they are working hard to get their system up to date. The other package of benefits for, as you asked for, small businesses is through the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. We've had two rounds of funding for that program to the tune overall of well over $600 billion. The first round was fully distributed. The second round, there is still some money there, and those funds are largely meant to cover the next 8 weeks of payroll to help tide small businesses with fewer than 500 employees through this crunch. So if in listening to me you feel as if that's something that you should have applied for, it's time to get in touch with your SBA lending institution, your bank, your credit union, your local community bank, and talk to somebody there about potentially putting in an application before the funds are exhausted.
Right. And I wanted to remind our listeners, Jean mentioned a variety of details there and resources. This call is being recorded, and all of the resources mentioned on the call will be available afterward. Some of what Jean referred to, you can see on AARP's website, the provisions in the various stimulus packages. That's AARP.org/coronavirus. It is confusing. There's been a lot done. There have been a lot of nuances and details to follow. So I know it's very tricky for people, but we have some good content there. I'd like to go to Mayor Benjamin. I was wondering, this is a time not just for financial distress for individuals, but really for cities and state governments as well. And I'm just wondering what Congress has done to help cities and state governments at this time.
I thought about starting with a pregnant pause. To say nothing.
I think your answer is probably not enough, but maybe you can tell a little bit about what they have done and what you'd like to see them do.
Sure. Congress stepped up early on and did provide some funding, direct funding to cities about 500,000 or larger across the country. Regrettably, that's only about 36 cities. So we've been involved in a fairly rigorous back and forth between the House and the Senate, asking for direct financial support to cities and towns all across the country. And that's because of a number of different reasons. First of all, as I go and advocate on Capitol Hill, I always remind our legislators up there that we're not asking for money to fall from D.C. like manna from heaven. These are actually our taxpayers' tax dollars that go to D.C., and we're asking for them to be repatriated to local governments where we actually engage with our citizens on an everyday basis to meet the need. The same attention that's been paid to the private sector also needs to be directed to the public sector, where critical services, the definition of a civilized society, are rendered: police protection, fire protection, solid waste and sanitation services. These are real. I mean, as we've watched a nearly 5% drop in GDP, it's against the backdrop of the fact that 85% of our citizens now live in cities and metropolitan areas. 89% of the jobs are there. 92% of America's GDP is created in cities and metro areas. So if cities are healthy, America's healthy. If cities are thriving, then the country will thrive in the long term as well. We've seen maybe a record $3 trillion in borrowing right now. The direct effect on state and local governments over the next year will probably total about $1 trillion. So it's going to be a significant shortfall. And obviously, we're all aggressively involved in managing our budgets and our fiscal situations to make sure we can still provide the services that our citizens need. We expect maybe a 20% drop in our general fund budget next year. Some other cities across the country are really facing some dire circumstances, particularly those that may rely heavily on a payroll tax situation as opposed to property taxes and the like. So we're advocating significantly that maybe in the coronavirus 4 bill that we'll find some consensus on Capitol Hill. And for those of you who believe in strong cities, who believe in building age-friendly communities, and believe that a city is representative of a place that serves as a platform for human potential, I'd encourage you to be involved in this discussion as well, encouraging your legislators to support America's cities.
Okay, that's the best case on behalf of America's cities by Mayor Benjamin. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. Before we continue, I want to provide a quick AARP Fraud Watch Network coronavirus alert. Scammers continue to use the headlines as opportunities to steal money or sensitive personal information. In fact, they are posing as federal government representatives, fishing for bank accounts and other sensitive information to, quote, deposit economic impact or stimulus payments. I assure you, the federal government will not call you about stimulus checks. For information about how the IRS is distributing the payments, visit irs.gov. Also know that scammers continue to try to sell fake coronavirus cures, treatments, and vaccines. Public health officials and private labs are working hard, but at this time, there is still no publicly available vaccine, treatment, or cure for COVID-19. Ignore offers that suggest otherwise. Visit aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork to learn more about these and other scams. Or call the Fraud Watch Network helpline. That number is 877-908-3360. 877-908-3360. Now it's time to address more of your questions with Andrea Grant of Lee Hecht Harrison, personal finance expert Gene Chatzky, and Mayor Steve Benjamin. Please press *3 at any time on your telephone keypad to be connected with AARP staff. Who do we have on the line now?
We have Mrs. Faulkner from D.C.
Okay, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
My question is, I just retired, but from the government, and I still need few quarter in for Social Security because mine was civil service and it didn't take out for Social Security. So I'm thinking about getting a job, so that Social Security can be taken out. And what are some of the skills that I think when I came on, you had mentioned some of the skills in getting jobs. Like I'm 69. I retired as a chief, but I think you mentioned skills, technology, leadership, and I think it was 6, 7, but I didn't get it all down.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Andrea Grant, can you talk a little bit about that? She has retired from the federal government and looking to get back into the workforce and is wondering about building her skills back up.
Sure. So I think there are really two answers here, Bill. So as far as skill building or evaluating or recognizing skills, because she certainly didn't get to that level, right, without having great skills, again, I would emphasize looking at the transferable skills, right? So the skills that she used that made her successful with her government career that can apply to any other sector, industry, or job. Like you said, Bill, there are AARP resources to help, right, with the resume builder or to recognize what those skills might be. Also, another great resource is Indeed.com. So www.ind, like David, EED, like David.com. Indeed can provide a wealth of resources, including transferable skills. Again, I'll repeat some of the jobs or the types of skills or workers that people are hiring rapidly for right now, because I think that might help, and I'll add a few more. So when you're looking for opportunities most immediately, you're going to find them in the areas of analysis, operations, security, compliance, implementing, and strategy. There are others, but those would be very comparable to the work it sounds like she was doing with the government. Again, some of the employers that she might want to look at right away once she has her resume and other documents prepared would be McDonald's, CVS Health, Home Depot. I'll add a couple of more, Bill, because in preparation for tonight's call, I had a plethora, right, of these resources available. So some of the others would be USAA, Northrop Grumman, Hallmark, Ericsson, Fifth Third Bank, St. Jude Hospital, Land O'Lakes, Hallmark, Lowe's, and Walmart. So I would encourage her to look into any of those potential employers to get more information about who's hiring and what skills might be needed or required, but also drawing on the skill set she already has.
Yeah, which sounds like it's substantial, having risen to the level she was with the federal government. So, all right, well, thank you very much for that. Who is our next caller?
Bill, we have a question coming in from Facebook Live, and this comes from Martha, and she's asking, for those of us who have a 403B that's heavily invested in the market, should that money be moved to a fixed account or to somewhere else? Many have already lost thousands.
Gene Chatzky, can you offer any insight there?
Yeah, it depends on your time horizon. So retirement itself lasts these days 30 years, sometimes more. And that means that you have more time than you may think to weather the ups and downs of the market. Money that you need to actually use to live on in the next few years, 3 years, 4 years, that money does not belong in risky investments. But if you've got a longer time horizon than that, even though it feels a little topsy-turvy and maybe making it difficult for you to watch your accounts on a regular basis and not clutch at your stomach because of the losses that you've already taken, it's probably better to wait for those monies to come back.
Okay. Gene, you had mentioned earlier on, you made a reference to the column I think you have coming out in the AARP magazine. Can you just remind our listeners what that's about and some of what you say in that column?
Sure. So, and it's appropriate in light of the last question. I took a look, or I am taking a look. It's in the upcoming issue at making the best bad choices right now. So we're living in an environment where we know we are faced with tough financial choices. But for example, if you are thinking I need to free up some additional cash, the better way to do that might be to soft pedal the contributions that you're making into your retirement accounts right now, rather than borrowing from those retirement accounts or pulling money out of your retirement accounts in the form of an actual withdrawal, which would mean paying income taxes on that money. By the same token, if you are finding it's difficult to sleep at night because you are worried about how much risk you're taking in your investments, selling them all is not the solution. But taking 5 or 10% and moving that money to safety to enable yourself to sleep at night may be. So it's about small moves, not all-in moves that are very difficult to get back from.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So who's on the line next?
We have a call from Mindy in Connecticut.
Hey, Mindy, what's your question? Hey there.
Yes, my question has to do with starting a business. I just wanted to get that AARP website again. And this person who was talking before with another young man, he was asking about, also he wanted to go into the job market. So it's the Lincoln profile. When I do the Lincoln profile, should I use their help or should I get a private person to help me? Or, it depends on, who's available or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I never did this before. So with the Lincoln profile, what does you also have available help?
So, Andrea Grant, I think you had provided some guidance for Frank in Pennsylvania about looking for employment. Maybe you could repeat some of that advice for Mindy.
I think, sure, Bill. So I think what I heard Mindy say is that she is looking to start a business. Can you confirm that for me, Bill, so I can answer correctly?
Yes, I believe she was.
Okay, so then my recommendation to her would be slightly different than Frank because I'm also a small business owner 3 times. And so the resources and the support you need to take that on is very different than launching a job search. So, for example, Mindy, I would encourage you to go to some resources like SCORE, SCORE, the Small Business Administration, and even your local Chamber of Commerce usually offers support with starting a business. A lot of times they offer support at no cost. Another resource you might want to look into is a career or a business coach, but not just any type of coach. I would encourage you to check for recommendations, ask for references, and make sure that this person is qualified and has the proven experience to help you not only get the business up and running, but will help you look at, and Jean can touch on this, right, your profit, your revenue, your startup costs, when you think you're going to actually start making money, how much money you have, right, to be able to support the business, getting legal things done. So there's a lot that goes into starting a business. One other thing I would encourage you to do is to establish what we call a board of directors. So these are your trusted resources like your accountant, your legal team, et cetera, that are going to be able to give you sound advice, sometimes advice that might be hard to hear or that you might not want to hear, but all in the spirit of making sure that you're successful. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I wonder, Mayor Benjamin, I wonder if you want to weigh in on this. I mean, if somebody were to ask you about local resources for starting a small business, what kinds of answers would you give?
Well, I would encourage folks also to go to your city and county government. At our city, and we're a number of cities are similarly situated, we have obviously an Office of Economic Development. We have an Office of Business Opportunities that's established for the express purpose of helping to stand up and also to help elevate small businesses across our community. We engage and we're a mid-sized city in the American South. We engage every single year with hundreds of entrepreneurs. And it's important, as I mentioned earlier as well, about the difference between perennials and millennials. The reality is that just as the questions here indicate, so many of our perennials are much more entrepreneurial than millennials. 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds start more businesses than any other cohort in American society. You know, if you looked at the 50-plus marketplace as a country, it's a $7.6 trillion market. You know, if you looked at that in terms of GDP, be the third largest economy behind the U.S. and China. We are living in a world where the folks in this phone are actually helping drive the American economy right now. And I think we should feel empowered by that. But touch base in Columbia, for example, it's our Office of Business Opportunities. If you go to our city website at columbiasc.gov, You can click on that department or our Office of Economic Development and see the host of different services that we use to help, again, elevate existing businesses, but also help start new businesses. Every city has those resources available, and I would encourage you to reach out to your respective city governments to help maybe meet that need as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And just a reminder for our listeners, if you'd like to ask a question, just press *3 at any time to be connected. Gene Chatzky, you were talking about, making some trade-offs and try to make some decisions about investments. What about people on the other end of the income scale? I mean, what if people simply aren't able to pay their bills now? What kind of advice would you offer them?
It's such a good question. So there is some relief, again, built into the CARES Act. If you have a mortgage that is federally backed, so it's serviced by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, the VA, the FHA, you can get forbearance, meaning the ability to not make your mortgage payments for 180 days, and then that can be renewed. And at the end of the time, you will work out a plan with your lender for how to make those payments again, whether it's a loan modification to essentially do sort of a mini refinance of your loan, or whether they'll be added to the back end of your loan. But that's available on federal loans. Similarly, on federal student loans, those payments are paused until September, and the interest rates have gone to zero until the end of September, and that includes Parent Plus loans, which are a form of federal student loans. If you have other debts, though, we are seeing a lot of lenders offering some leeway. We're seeing them working with customers, but you have to pick up the phone. And the same is true. You have to pick up the phone if you want relief on those mortgage payments. Talk to your lender. Ask what's possible. They understand that consumers are having a really, really difficult time right now. And yes, bottom line is they do want to get paid, but they want to get paid eventually. And they understand that working with their customers is what's necessary right now. So the overarching advice here is don't hide. Pick up the phone, tell your lenders what's going on, have a conversation, ask for relief, and see what's possible.
That's such great advice, Gene. When we talk to our members about when they have loved ones in nursing homes, we say this is a time to be a real advocate for your loved ones. Make sure that they're getting the services and resources they need. But I think you make the point that you've got to be an advocate for yourself here at this time, and can't be afraid to reach out to your bank, credit cards, and I would think that it's not in their interest either, the companies, to have somebody default on a loan, be unable to pay or file bankruptcy. It would seem they have an incentive to work with people these days.
Absolutely. They do have an incentive to work with people these days because, when you get back on your feet, they of course want happy customers to stick with them. And I would also say that it's a good time to be an aggressive consumer on your own part. If it's been a long time since you picked up the phone and you negotiated for a better deal on your cable or your wireless bill or your internet, it's time. Pick up the phone and try that. I mentioned how interest rates were lower than we've seen them in some time. If it's been a long time and you've been a good customer and you've got a good credit score, you can pick up the phone and you can ask for a reduction in the interest rate that you're paying on your credit cards. We know that the average American has 21 different subscriptions, and those subscriptions cost us about $250 on average every single month. Look at where your money's going. Look at what you can get rid of. We now have this, because of the way that we've been living, staying home, we've got a microscope on what we're actually using and what we're not using. And so if you're not using it, and that includes that gym membership that you're not going to right now, cancel it or pick up the phone and put it on hold, but don't continue spending money for things that you're just not using.
Okay, I will give one more plug to my my employer, AARP. We actually have online exercise videos, so go ahead and cancel that gym membership and go online and exercise in your living room. Let's go back to our callers. Who's next in the queue?
We have Mishan from Virginia.
Hey, Mishan, what's your question?
Well, excuse me, my question is kind of twofold. I am earlier on in the conversation, we're talking about re-upping your skill levels or what have you. And then you had a former employee of District of Columbia who was a chief. And I recently left my employment with the District of Columbia because of illness. But I am looking for employment, and I have a PhD in public policy and public administration. And it's been very difficult. So I did not know if my level of education was kind of harming me. I'm not looking in the field of academia right now because due to this surgery, I have problems with my vocal cords now, so I can't talk for a long period of time to teach on in-classroom class, but possibly I can do online, but I haven't heard back. So I have taken some, I just finished some additional credentialing in the field of advocacy, which I did for many a year, just to try to update things. But I'm wondering if my degree is harming me in the current marketplace.
That's an interesting question. Andrea Grant, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that for Mishan in Virginia.
Sure, of course I do. And first, I hope that you are well and commend you for even participating tonight. So the short answer is absolutely not. Having a PhD is not prohibiting you from achieving your employment goals. What may be prohibiting you is there may be a gap on your resume or your CV because, as you know, with policy or higher ed, a lot of times they are looking more for a CV versus a resume to see what your experience is. I like what you said and completely agree with you in regard to trying to get into an adjunct position, particularly for any kind of online schooling or training. You might also want to look into organizations like right here in D.C., the American Institutes for Research. Those type of think tanks, right, or thought leadership that comes out of those types of organizations oftentimes come from folks like you. Altarum Institute is another organization that most of the individuals there, right, have a PhD and credentialing and experience in education like you. You can go online. There's actually a website, www.phdjobs.com. And you can look for, and they actually will show in an itemized view of the types of jobs that they're hiring for all across the United States. You can upload your resume or CV there. You can receive job alerts. There are events you can be alerted to participate in. So there's a plethora of resources there, but those would be some of the things I would consider or go after. But I can't stress enough networking. 90% of people, regardless of education or experience, find their next opportunity through networking. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to people you used to work with and work for. Talk to people at your church. Use the AARP resources that are available. There's a lot of jobs out there, particularly for people with this type of background and education, but you're likely going to uncover it, particularly at that level, through networking.
Yeah. An interesting concept, networking during a time of physical distancing. Do you have any suggestions for our listeners about how you can network virtually?
Absolutely. So I mentioned it very briefly earlier, Meetup. So if you go into a Google or any search platform and literally type in the word Meetup, MEET space UP, there are meetup groups, Bill, that used to physically meet in person, and they cover any topic or thought area you might want to think of. They've now, of course, moved to all virtual. These could be in the areas of different types of job-related, content. This can be, again, to volunteer, to share and exchange information, just to get to know people. You have some organizations or professional organizations, if you're a member or if the listeners are a member of those, that have gone through this type of format. Zoom offers a free subscription now to people because of COVID-19, so you can get a Zoom account, and even for the previous caller, she can start her own group, right, or group that might want to talk about different things that are related to her area of expertise. Also, go to LinkedIn. All networking virtually right now doesn't have to require being able to see the person's face. LinkedIn has a variety of groups that people can join and participate in and dialogue in as well. So I would encourage to look into some of those types of resources, Bill, as people look to continue to social distance while we figure out how we're actually going to reintegrate once these restrictions have been lifted.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Who's next in the question queue?
There's a question coming in from the webinar platform from Andrea, and this one I think is for Mayor Benjamin. It's a rather long question, so bear with me. Does Mayor Benjamin know whether South Carolina or perhaps other states who track demographic data for people receiving state-issued or Department of Labor unemployment insurance benefits for the purpose of targeting outreach efforts and workforce development training programs? So post-pandemic, I wonder if the state labor department or local entities will make an effort to match employers with job seekers.
Mr. Mayor, did you follow that question? And
I did, and
okay.
I thought it was a great question and something that requires some substantive follow-up. It's a very thoughtful way to try and connect the dots as we emerge from this incredible event. That was a great question from a South Carolinian. Again, I put my email address out there. It's Stephen with the PH.Benjamin at columbiasc.gov. Again, Stephen, PH with the PH.Benjamin at columbiasc.gov. I'd love to maybe put some more meat around that question and to submit that to the governor's office, because I think it's a very thoughtful way. We've seen so many of our state unemployment offices, our Department of Employment and Workforce here in South Carolina and everywhere across the country, just overwhelmed over the last several weeks. And certainly there's always a bit of connection, but also disconnect with our Department of Labor. Finding some ways to maybe connect the dots between those two and the Department of Commerce to find ways to come out of this even stronger by connecting, obviously, businesses that have great need along with, of course, citizens who have need to earn a living is a really good, I think, thoughtful idea that I'd love to maybe help advance along with you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know you're very well connected, Mayor Benjamin, to the Conference of Mayors. Maybe it's something to float to that group as well for other metropolitan areas around the country. I thought it was a really smart suggestion.
Absolutely.
Who else do we have on the line?
We have Barbara from Maryland.
Hey, Barbara, go ahead with your question.
Hi. Yes, thank you very much. So I have two questions. The first is, do qualifications for unemployment differ by state? I am 75, and I started last year renting rooms out in my house through Airbnb to supplement my Social Security retirement income. And I was turned down, even though I made like $18,000 just in rental income. They told me that I had insufficient income to qualify. And I just was flabbergasted, and they gave no way to follow up, no website or anything. So I just wondered if you knew the answer to that question, whether that differs by state. And, I have no idea what their base qualification is. And my second question is, I received a stimulus deposit yesterday, but it was only for $1,000. I mean, that's good, but it wasn't the $1,200, and I made way under $75,000 last year. So those are my two questions.
Okay, Barbara, thank you very much. Gene Chatzky, I wonder if you can weigh in on those two.
Yeah, so the first, the base levels, it is a state-by-state qualification. And so I would say I wouldn't give up. I would go to your state. I would not call first thing on a Monday morning or last thing on a Friday afternoon, because we know those are the busiest times that I would actually pick up the phone and see if you can get an answer on what happened there. As far as the inaccurate amount of your deposit, I got to say, this one is a new one on me. It does sound like they seem to have an inaccurate amount of income for you. If they didn't get your 2019 tax returns on which this is based, at this point, they will base it on your 2018 tax returns. Possibly you earned more in 2018. If it's an error on their part, you will have a chance to rectify it, but likely not until you file your 2020 tax return. And the reason for this is that the stimulus payment is actually a refundable tax credit for 2020. So for people who have received inaccurate amounts, there will be a way to reconcile, and you will get the money that you're owed either off your taxes in 2020 or added to your refund for 2020h.
And, Gene, will that happen behind the scenes, that the IRS will figure out the error?
No, that'll actually happen as part of filing your taxes. It'll be a new line item on the 2020 return.
I see. So is there anything for Barbara or people in her situation to do right now?
You could certainly try going to the IRS's website and filing some sort of notification, but my guess, based on people, for example, who had babies early in this year and for that reason did not, because it wasn't reflected, they had no dependents on their 2019 tax return, were not able to receive the additional $500, what we're being told in those cases, and others where there have been errors in payment amounts, is that it will take until the 2020 tax return to get it sorted out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. We're coming up on the end of our teletown hall. I want to ask Andrea Grant, Gene Chatzky, and Mayor Benjamin for any closing thoughts or recommendations that AARP members should understand most from our conversation today. Andrea Grant, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you, Bill. So I would, in closing, suggest that people or ask them to use the resources we've mentioned on the call, but especially the AARP resources that are available. And one of my buddies here at work, Bob Chayette, who's also a Lee Hecht Harrison certified coach, said there is only one letter difference between networking and not working. So for the people that are looking for employment, I thought that was pretty clever. So I'd like to leave with those closing remarks. And Bill, I wouldn't be a good daughter if I didn't say happy birthday to my mom who's listening. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Very good. Gene Chatzky, any closing thoughts or recommendations?
I think one of the things that has been sort of a through line in my remarks tonight is just this need to be persistent on your own behalf. A lot of the programs that we're talking about, particularly the ones from the government, are new programs. And quite frankly, there are a lot of agencies that are just still getting their acts together. And so if you believe that you are due money that you are not receiving, whether it's from an unemployment payment or something else, be persistent on your own behalf. It's not the time to stop trying.
All right. Thank you. And Mayor Benjamin, any closing thoughts?
No, just I'm a huge believer that the two most powerful words in the English language are thank you. I want to thank the AARP for including me on this call. Thank my colleagues and fellow panelists. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for tonight. I remain encouraged that the folks on this call, all the tens of thousands of you, we've been through major challenges together. Sometimes they've been individual. This is one of the rare opportunities where acting as a collective, we can overcome this. So I want to encourage everyone to be resilient and to let's take some time to be thoughtful as we move forward and recognize that together we're going to navigate what lies ahead with optimism, confidence, and a view on posterity, the long-term view. So thank you, and God bless you to all the mothers. Happy Mother's Day.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been a really informative discussion, and thanks to each of our panelists for answering our questions this evening. And thank you, our AARP members, volunteers, and listeners for participating in this discussion. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. In the face of this crisis, we're providing information and resources to help older adults and those caring for them protect themselves from the virus, prevent its spread to others while taking care of themselves. All of the resources referenced here tonight, including a recording of the Q&A event, can be found at aarp.org/coronavirus beginning on May 8th. Again, that web address is aarp.org/coronavirus. Go there if your question was not addressed, and you'll find the latest updates, as well as information created specifically for older adults and family caregivers. We hope you learned something that can help you and your family stay safe and healthy. Please be sure to tune into our next teletown halls. That's next Thursday, May 14th. We'll have two events on that day. The first at 1 p.m. Eastern Time will address how the veterans community is being impacted by the global pandemic. The second event is at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It will include TV stars Ty Pennington of the Extreme Makeover Home Edition, Carla Hall of America's Top Chef, and Matt Paxton of Hoarders. They will share how we can make the most of our extended time at home while physical distancing and sheltering-in-place orders continue. Thank you all very much, and have a good day. This concludes our call.